What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are building our turbo downpipe for our K24 swap Subaru BRZ. Now this is going to be a very similar process to what we just did for the intercooler piping, so I'm going to get all of this stuff cut, test fit, and welded together. Let's do it. So as you can probably tell, I've already kind of started piecing some things together here. This is all going to be done out of 3-inch stainless steel tubing. This is a 90 degree that's going to come directly off of the back of the turbo, and this is a 45 that's going to angle down. So let me show you a bit of a closer look at that. All right, so here we have our turbo with the piping hooked up to go to our intercooler, but now we've got to focus on the exhaust side of things. And if I take this here little piece, which is a 45 degree tube with a 90 degree bend, and it's already, taped together and everything. If I drop this down through this gap, this guy just about perfectly lines up with the end of the V-band flange right here on the outlet of the turbo. I don't know, I'm probably covering up the angle here, but yeah, just like that. And I wish I could get you guys an angle to show you where that 45 comes out and sort of points down towards the bottom. So we've got the beginning of our tube here. If we slide this down through that gap, and then we look at where this surface mates up, that's relatively close, and then I can just kind of clock this slightly towards the passenger side of the car to the left. Obviously holding this with one hand and the camera in the other is a little bit tricky. You can kind of see where the outlet of that 45 comes out down there. And then it's going to be even harder for me to show you underneath the car because it's just on jack stands. I don't have a lift, so we're going to be crawling around a good bit underneath. So I'll try to give you guys an idea of what we're working with on the bottom. This right here is a part of the Catback for my aftermarket Subaru BRZ exhaust, and I believe it's an MXP Comp R500, something like that. I'll make sure to put it up here. It's been such a long time since I installed that, I can't even remember what it is. But so as you can see, that is back even farther behind the transmission tunnel. So we've got to come all the way from this gap right here, which goes up to the turbo, and feed it down and get all the way down to that section. Now, what I'm gonna have to do is actually make that in 2 different pieces because I don't wanna have one big, long piece. So most likely, I'm gonna have kind of a mid pipe that will go from there to right around sort of where the front subframe starts. And then I'll have the actual downpipe, which will connect up to the turbo. Now, as you might imagine, with how low to the ground this car is, it's only up on jack stands about as high as I'm safely comfortable willing to put it. This is going to be really difficult for me to show you guys sort of what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Most likely the section that goes back to my existing Catback is going to have kind of like an S shape because it has to get around the transmission, and I need to be able to mount it as high up underneath the car as possible because if I mount it super low, it's just going to drag on everything. So let's move forward with the turbo downpipe first, make sure that we have all of our angles correct and that everything's pointing in the right direction, and then we'll kind of tackle what that little last mid pipe, if you want to call it that, is going to have to look like. Now, I do want to go ahead and answer a couple of questions that you guys might have regarding this specific turbo manifold. I don't know if I ever in any of my videos in the past ever mentioned what manifold this is. This is the Toge Factory or TF Works rear wheel drive K-swap manifold. Now I believe they have a couple of different variants, but this one should be relatively recognizable based on how far forward this turbo is located. So you can see that it's not, a lot of these rear wheel drive K-swap manifolds have the turbo located basically in the center of the exhaust ports. It's relatively easy to make it equal length that way, which is what you want with a turbo manifold. But the problem for me, especially in this particular chassis with the manifolds that are centered on the exhaust ports, is that when this turbo is pushed further back and is mounted centered, that means that your turbine is going to sit about here, and then the turbine outlet is going to sit about there-ish. So it would be really difficult for me personally, as a, you know, first-time fabricator, first-time welder, all that kind of stuff, to make a downpipe where it would connect onto this V-band way back here and be able to turn that down to get down through this gap right here. You have your coolant line running from the back of the engine up to the front. And you also got a bunch of wiring right here. So this turbo manifold is good for that reason, because of the fact that it's easier to, you know, run that 90-degree straight off the back and have it turn down a bit earlier. So you're trying to sort of mitigate how much heat buildup you have near your coolant and your wiring. They have one with a precision V-band mount and one with a Garrett V-band mount. This is the Garrett V-band mount one. This is the one that I'm gonna go with. I'll just leave a link maybe in the top right corner or down in the description for this one specifically if you wanna look at that. Now, the other question, what am I gonna do for my wastegate? The wastegate port is all the way down here. This guy right here, it's another V-band. And it would technically be relatively straightforward to run a recirculated wastegate down underneath the manifold and come out this side and then meet right back up with the downpipe that's going to come off this way. I personally just don't feel like doing that. I'm just going to keep it real. I don't necessarily have a preference of like, oh, I want it to be recirculated or I want it to be open dump. It's just, for me, the effort to recirculate it, it's just not that big of a deal for me personally. So it's a 2-inch outlet on the wastegate. It's a 50 millimeter wastegate, I believe. But yeah, basically I'm just gonna more or less point it either straight down or just go out. So hopefully that answers a couple of questions about the manifold, the wastegate. I'm planning to run 14, 15 pounds of boost. So it'll probably just, most likely, I'm just gonna run it off a spring. I'm just gonna run it off a 14-pound spring pressure. You can go electronic boost control, boost by gear, all that kind of stuff. I don't really, to be honest, I don't really care enough. I'm just being straight with you guys. You know, if you want to get the electronic boost controller so you can dial it in and do all that extra, I'm just gonna run a 14-pound spring and hope that I get the power numbers, and if not, we can bump up to a larger spring and that's fine. For me, that's totally fine. Let's get back into the downpipe. Now, one of the most important parts for any turbo downpipe is actually a little section like this called a flex pipe. This is a 3-inch flex pipe from Tycon Industries. They make amazing stuff and they supply tons of titanium materials, hence the name Tycon Industries. But yeah, so essentially what a flex pipe is going to do is this side is going to connect up to the turbo. This flex pipe is going to go right here at the bottom of this 45. And what a flex pipe is intended to do is that as the engine vibrates and moves around and as you're driving hard and taking corners and all of that, your exhaust, really all of your components, are going to move to a certain degree. Now, having a flex pipe as a part of your exhaust setup, specifically part of the exhaust that comes directly off of the engine, is going to help to sort of eliminate or reduce the amount of vibration that gets transferred to the rest of your exhaust system, and can potentially help save your downpipe and the rest of your exhaust from cracking, the welds cracking, just in general, like damage on your exhaust system. So having a flex pipe is a really big component of that. So I'm not exactly sure how long this 45 is going to need to be before this guy goes in, but that's what we're about to figure out. So what I want to happen, I need the 45 to come out in this kind of a direction, and that's actually just about the right height. So if I cut just enough off to be able to fit the flex pipe here, that should be pretty close to the right height, because it needs to line up or be as close to the underside of the chassis here as possible. So most likely I'm going to take another 45. So this is pointing at relatively a 45-degree angle straight down right now. So I would take another 45 to turn this flat and go straight back this way to meet up with this guy right here, the existing Catback. I would need to cut roughly 4 inches off of this, because that's the length of that flex pipe. So the flex pipe can mount right here, and then I'll put the V-band right on the end of that flex pipe, and then I'll have the other, opposing V-band to the 45 that goes back this way, and then it's hopefully just a straight shot back in that direction. We've got the downpipe coming down. This is that 45. I ended up actually shaving a little bit of this 45 off from the top up here, about an inch, just to sort of raise this outlet point up a little bit without actually taking anything off of this leg of the 45. And then right here I have a 45-degree bend that I have cut off, and this will mate up with the bottom of where the downpipe goes. I'm imagining that I will probably just have the flex pipe and 1/2 of this V-band flange, so basically 1/2, tacked right onto the end of that, where that 45 comes down from the engine, and then I'll have the other one of these right on this 45 right here, like so, so that the downpipe can just sort of slide right into place, and then this 45 is inside of this really long 3-inch section, and that is going to more or less get us all the way back to this guy right here, which is the rest of our Catback system. Will most likely, this long stretch right here, as it kind of comes back this way, is going to need to be angled over to get into this section, but we'll figure that out when we get there. So let's go ahead and cut the downpipe at those marks for the flex pipe and the V-band, and then we'll get this taped to part of the V-band flange, and we'll start sort of figuring out what we need to do to get down back this way. All right, so I made that first cut where I had it sort of labeled cut flex pipe, and I still have the mark that goes all the way around here that I used that zip tie for, helped me create a relatively straight mark all the way around the tube without sort of, walking around as we're going off and getting sort of off angle. So I'm actually thinking that I'm going to need to leave just a little bit of extra material instead of cutting this sort of exactly to length, because this pipe and this flex pipe, as well as with the V-band flange, is not going to go right on the very end and just sort of get butt welded. So this is actually going to go inside of the flex pipe just slightly. Not a whole lot. I don't know if you guys are even gonna really sort of be able to tell how much that is sticking into the flex pipe all the way down, but so if we go with, it's got about that much, that's roughly an inch and a quarter. And then as we go in, I'm going to try to feed this inside of the flex pipe by maybe 1/8 of an inch or so. And so that way, whenever we go to weld this, instead of just doing a butt weld around the top surface, we're actually going to be doing a fillet weld down in this joint between those two pieces. So here we have our V-band. It's basically gonna go inside of the flange. It's not just gonna sit right here perfectly on the edge. I think it's milled so that it is intentionally sitting inside of the pipe. There's even a slight edge on the inside. You can kind of see that rim that's on the inside. So that is milled so that this sits nice and flat. And then you come in and you just do a fillet weld in here around this edge instead of butt welding it like how you weld the pipes together. So we have the 90 degree that's coming off of the actual turbocharger, right? And then we have this guy. This mates up to the bottom of that 90. And the idea is to have it something like this. And then the other half of this V-band will go on the 45 that takes this section down and flat. And so that V-band will go onto that piece. And so there we have, hopefully, more or less, pretty close to the finished product. Now, one of the important things to note is the angle between where this 45 comes off and where this 90 comes up, because as you can tell, if we line up the 90 sort of perfectly straight with the camera, the 45 is pointing off at a bit of an angle. And that's because of the fact that when this gets mounted on the turbo, it's actually gonna sit slightly at an angle this way. And so I needed the 45 to sort of try to counteract that angle. So if this is pointing this way, that's why that 45 is sort of pointing the opposite direction. So I have one mark there, and really just to be sort of safe, I need to put another double mark on the sort of the opposite side. That is more or less what the downpipe is going to look like. So now we'll put this back in place, and what I'll likely do is just go ahead and clamp the other side of the V-band flange onto this, and then whenever I go to take the 45 that's down under the car that I was kind of talking about earlier, I can sort of fit it into the back side of the other V-band, and that'll sort of help me get like what my orientation of that V-band or of that 45 kind of needs to be. And then we'll figure out sort of that last section that goes back towards the other catback, if we need to kind of skew our angle over a little bit, or if it's gonna just be able to go straight back, which I don't think it's gonna be able to just, you know, have one long piece and then the flange and have that be it. That would be great, but unfortunately I don't think it's gonna work out quite that easily. But that's looking pretty good. I'm actually rather happy about that. Alright, so I'm going to try and give you guys a look at what we're working with down here. So this is the downpipe, obviously. The V-band flange was taped on there, but it is now, I guess my tape job wasn't all that strong, so it is no longer attached. This is the 45-degree bend that's going to come off of the downpipe right here and essentially come down at a 45-degree angle and then more or less kind of flatten out. So I have to try and sneak that 45 and the long tube off of this downpipe and sort of up through this gap. And it's not even really much of a gap, but this space right here, I have to try and get that pipe up into this space as high as I can, just so that it's not hanging down super low and gonna scrape on every speed bump I go over. Because of the fact that it's not really going to be able to fit all the way up there, it can't go straight and merge into the catback. That's kind of why I have this string here. I've just sort of been hanging the long end of that straight tube through this to kind of take some of the pressure off of it. So where that tube comes out is sort of here-ish at this angle. And so I'm gonna have to come up with a bit of a creative solution on how to take that long straight. Most likely what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a 90-degree bend, cut it in half so that I end up with two 45s, and then sort of rotate one piece so that I have sort of an S bend. So the tube will essentially come straight under, you know, this gap between the transmission and the underside of the car, the tunnel, and will sort of, as it comes straight here, it'll go up at a 45 and then straight at a 45 towards this, my catback. And then obviously, like, I have my 2-bolt flange that will go on the end of that. This is the cable for my wideband sensor, by the way, if you're wondering. The excess of that will get pulled up through the shift boot, which is where it kind of snakes out from. All right, well, I think that's just about the closest we're gonna be able to get it. So yeah, I got those little 45 bend pieces in here and sort of clocked more or less in the right direction. I got the 2-bolt flange put on, and that is currently holding. The only thing that's not currently attached is the V-band, but I can see from here that that fits up pretty dang nice. So in terms of all the fit up, I think we're just about done. And we are clearing here. You guys aren't going to be able to see from the angle that you're at, but we're clearing underneath. So we're not touching anything here. It's just about as high up as I could manage to get it without touching. And so this guy goes up there and fits in. I know you can't really tell how well that seals, but I can feel that those grooves are kind of meshing together. And then we're coming up here, we clear this gap, may not look like it, everything's super close. And then we've got the 90, the 45, and the 2-bolt flange right here. So all of our angles are working out. Obviously the exhaust is the lowest point under the car, which kind of stinks, but with the larger CD009 transmission, there's only so high we really can slide this up into this gap. So there's really, there's only so much we can do. So, I mean, I'm relatively happy with how that turned out. So let's pull it all out and get sort of a final look before it gets welded. All right, so here is what I kind of estimate the final product to kind of look like, right? So we have the downpipe. We've already seen this a handful of times, right? And then now we've got what I am just gonna call the mid pipe right here. So we got the 2-bolt flange on there. It's all marked up, it's all taped. Now that we've got everything out of the car, just balance. So yeah, now it's pretty much just ready for welding. So I mentioned this earlier kind of in passing, but I guess I didn't really kind of flesh out the details of this. This coming weekend, I'm going to be flying out to Boston, Rhode Island, somewhere up there in the Northeast. That's in about 2 days. I have about 2 days until I need to leave to you know, be able to catch the flight and everything. So that doesn't really give me personally enough time to weld all of these pieces together and kind of have it done before I leave. So as much as I would like to weld all of this stuff together and do it myself and say that I did it myself, I'm gonna take it to heat lightning. Kind of like how I did with my intercooler pipes right here. I'm gonna have to take it to heat lightning because I want to say that I did everything on this car myself, but the problem is, like, I want this thing to be done so bad. It has been over 2 years since this car has run, and I've been working on the swap for the better part of 12 or 13 months. So I just want this thing to be done, and so if I can take all of this stuff, which is marked, taped, you know, basically wiped down with acetone and weld it together, if I can take this to the shop and have them do it while I'm at this wedding and then pick it up when I get back and just have it be ready for me, and then I can close out this video and then I can start prepping the engine to start, that is what I would prefer to do, as opposed to not doing any of the welding before I leave to go to this wedding and then get back and have to spend a week, you know, getting all of this stuff just right. And if I screw something up, like how I did with the aluminum, I don't want to take another 3 weeks trying to weld this stainless together. So with that in mind, I'm gonna take it to heat lightning. They did an absolutely killer job on my intercooler pipes. They were perfect. They got it done in a timely manner. It was affordable. Like, there's really no downside to doing this. So I'm gonna drop it off with them. I'm gonna pick it up when I get back from my travel from the wedding. So with that said, I'll see you guys when I get back. And we're back. I've already been to heat lightning to pick up the pipes, and they look oh so nice. So let's see what we got. So we already saw these not too long ago, but now obviously everything is welded together. And they again did another fantastic job. I mean, all of those are nice and gold. Really, really nice welds. Great job on pretty much everything here. I haven't seen, as I've been looking at these, I haven't seen a single thing that I'm unhappy with. All of these welds are really, really well done. And in addition to doing these, as well as getting the O2 sensor bong, which is on the underneath side right here, they also did the intake air temp sensor bong for my intercooler pipe. As you guys probably know, they welded all of these intercooler pipes together for me, at least this half. I did the ones over here myself, but they went ahead and put the bung in for my intake air temp sensor. So that's great. So that's essentially just gonna mount more or less kind of underneath sort of the bottom of where this piece is gonna be sitting, right? So it's not gonna be completely hidden, but then again, it doesn't have to be. So with all of these parts, let's throw it together and get the final look at what this engine bay is gonna look like. All right, guys, here is kind of more or less the final look. At some point, I will get some kind of an intake. This is a 4-inch intake into this compressor housing. So I don't know if I'm just gonna run like a little, there's hardly even any room to run like a K&N cone filter right here. So I might have to do like a 90, come out this way and then put the filter on it so it's up front. But I'll figure that out. There's also a really good chance that I just get a turbo guard, like one of those mesh pieces that goes on here and just clamps on. The intercooler pipe back with the bung underneath. I haven't hooked the sensor up yet. I actually have to go get it. I have not gotten the sensor yet, but that'll just be an easy part from O'Reilly's. And then we have our downpipe here. I kind of don't feel like climbing back underneath the car, but everything under there fits up just about right. It's not perfect, but then again, it also has to do a lot with my construction of it. You know, it's not totally perfect, but everything will seal and it'll be all good. But yeah, so we got the downpipe going down there, and I am going to, at the very least, have a turbo blanket that will cover this, and I'm gonna wrap all of this in heat wrap. What I probably will end up doing, depending on what the engine bay temps look like over here, I might actually take the turbo, or the turbine housing and the downpipe to go get Cerakoted, and then on top of that, I'll wrap it all up, kind of like what I was talking about. But yeah, intercooler pipe's done, intercooler mounted, turbo manifolds, or not manifold, downpipe and all of that installed. And that's gonna wrap it up for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being patient with me as we've been doing this build. We're getting very close to the end here. Big shout out again to Heat Lightning Speed Shop in Gainesville, Georgia, for doing all of my fabrication for me on all these pipes. I was able to drop it off with them, go travel across the country, come back, pick it up from them, and drop it in, and it all fits exceptionally well. So again, I can't thank them enough. I am absolutely gonna be going back to them in the future for just about anything fabrication related. We are this close to starting this thing up. And I know I've been saying that at the end of all of my videos lately in the last, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 videos, I've said, oh, we're this close. Seriously, I need to do oil, coolant, I need to bleed the clutch, I need to put spark plugs in it, load the base tune onto the Haltech ECU, and hit the start button. So like, we're actually stupidly close. I'm so incredibly excited to get this thing started up. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date and see this thing start up in another week or two. And until next time, build your dreams.